The Lighthouse Keeper's Warning: A Tale of Isolation and Dread, Part 1. Arrival at Blackshore Lighthouse. The cold wind howled as Jonathan Crane stepped off the boat and onto the rocky shore. The towering silhouette of Blackshore Lighthouse loomed above him, its stark white facade weathered and peeling from years of relentless storms. Nestled on a desolate stretch of coast, the lighthouse stood as the last line of defense against the unforgiving waves of the northern sea. Jonathan was no stranger to solitude. A seasoned lighthouse keeper, he had spent years maintaining remote beacons along the coast. But Blackshore was different. The stories about it whispers among sailors and townsfolk alike spoke of its cursed past and the warnings left behind by its previous keepers. Jonathan dismissed the tales as mere superstition, yet a chill of unease lingered in the back of his mind as he climbed the steep path toward the lighthouse. Awaiting him at the entrance was Edgar Tate, the aging keeper he was replacing. Edgar's face was pale and drawn, his hands trembling as he handed Jonathan the keys. "You'll want to heed the warnings, lad," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Stay out of the basement and never, under any circumstances, light the lamp on the wrong night." Before Jonathan can ask for an explanation, Edgar hurried away, leaving him alone with the roaring wind and the ominous structure. Part 2, settling in inside the lighthouse. The air was damp and carried a faint metallic scent. The circular walls were lined with shelves of dusty books, navigation charts, and equipment, while the spiral staircase twisted upward toward the lamp room. The living quarters were sparse but sufficient: a cot, a wooden table, and a single oil lamp. Jonathan spent the first few days settling in, performing routine maintenance, and familiarizing himself with the logbooks left by Edgar. The entries were erratic, scrawled in increasingly shaky handwriting. Phrases like, "The voices grow louder and it watches from the dark," appeared frequently, unsettling him despite his logical nature. On the fourth night, as the storm raged outside, Jonathan heard it for the first time, a faint tapping sound coming from below. He froze, listening intently. It seemed to emanate from the locked door to the basement. Part 3. The warning ignored curiosity got the better of him. Against Edgar's warning, Jonathan retrieved the heavy iron key labeled basement and unlocked the door. The air inside was cold and oppressive, the faint tapping growing louder as he descended the narrow staircase. The basement was a cavernous space, its walls carved from the rocky foundation. In the dim light of his lantern, Jonathan saw strange markings etched into the stone symbols he didn't recognize. At the center of the room was an old chest, its lid slightly ajar. Inside the chest, he found an antique spyglass and a bundle of yellowed papers. The papers were a journal written by a former keeper from decades ago. They described strange occurrences, phantom ships on the horizon, whispers in the wind, and a malevolent presence that seemed to inhabit the lighthouse itself. Suddenly, the tapping stopped. Jonathan felt a cold breath on the back of his neck. He spun around, but the basement was empty. Part 4. The lantern's glow as the weeks passed. The disturbances grew more frequent. Objects moved on their own. Disembodied whispers echoed through the halls, and the lamp in the tower flickered inexplicably. Each time Jonathan tried to rationalize the events, something more inexplicable would happen. One stormy night, a shipwreck occurred just beyond the reef. Jonathan rushed to the tower, lighting the lamp to guide the survivors to safety. But as the light swept across the waves, he saw not desperate sailors, but shadowy figures standing on the water, their hollow eyes staring up at him. Edgar's words haunted him. Never light the lamp on the wrong night. Part 5. The revelation determined to understand the source of the hauntings. Jonathan delved deeper into the journal he had found. The final entries describe the keeper's descent into madness, haunted by a figure referred to as the Watcher. The journal claimed the Watcher was a guardian of something buried beneath the lighthouse, a secret that must never be disturbed. Jonathan realized the tapping sound he'd heard wasn't random. It was a pattern, almost like a code, beckoning him to return to the basement. Against his better judgment, he descended once more, this time bringing tools to dig into the floor where the markings were most concentrated. What he unearthed was a small, leaden box. When he opened it, a rush of freezing air extinguished his lantern. Inside was a shard of black glass, pulsating faintly with an unnatural light. Part 6. The final warning. From that moment, the hauntings escalated. The whispers became screams. The figures in the dark grew bolder, and Jonathan's mind began to unravel. The shards seemed to draw him toward the edge of insanity, showing him visions of the past, a massacre at the lighthouse, the original keepers succumbing to its curse, and the figure of the Watcher looming above it all. In his final hours, Jonathan recorded his experiences in the logbook, pleading for anyone who found it to leave the shard undisturbed. His last entry read, "The lamp must remain dark, for its light calls to them. Do not heed the voices. Do not open the door." When Edgar returned weeks later to check on the new keeper, he found the lighthouse abandoned. The shard was missing, and Jonathan's fate became another mystery added to the legend of Blackshore Lighthouse.